My name is Olivia Bennett, and if you ever hear my story, know this. I never asked for power, but I earned every bit of it. I was born and raised in Chicago, in a house that looked like something out of an old American movie. White columns, tall windows, stained glass shining rainbows on the hallway floors, and a front lawn so green it seemed impossible. We lived on Lakeshore Drive, in a mansion that always felt just a little too big for the three of us. My mother, my father, and me. My father, Victor Bennett, was a legend in the tech industry. He founded Bennett Dynamics when he was still in his 20s. By the time I was born, he was already showing up in magazines and on TV as the next big name in American business.
He had a reputation for building things, software, systems, and most of all, wealth.
He believed in efficiency, profit, and hard work above all else. But love in our house was something measured by achievement. Praise was given as a bonus only for extraordinary performance. There was no gentle affection, no soft apologies, just high expectations and a silent kind of pride. My mother, Clara, was the only one who could ever soften him. She was the kind of woman who loved gardenias and old books, who smiled at everyone and kept secrets in her eyes. She died when I was 17, right as I was finishing high school. Losing her was like losing the sun. Our house, with all its rooms and shining windows, became colder, more silent. My father threw himself even harder into his work, and I learned to be strong, to never let my feelings show, and to always keep moving forward. After graduating from Northwestern, I joined Bennett Dynamics straight away. People said it was nepotism, but I was determined to prove them wrong. I wanted to show everyone, including my father, that I was more than just his daughter. Those early years were the hardest of my life. I was given the worst projects, the toughest teams, and the most impossible deadlines. Every morning I was in the office before dawn, coffee in hand, ready to outwork everyone. Every night, I was the last to leave, lights flickering above my desk as the city fell asleep outside. But those long hours changed me. I learned everything: how to code, how to pitch investors, how to read people's faces in a meeting. I traveled all over America and across Europe, making deals with partners, signing contracts, listening more than I talked, always watching for an opening. I learned that trust is rare in business, and loyalty is never free. But I also learned how to find the right people, how to inspire them, and how to build something real out of nothing. Bennett Dynamics was worth about $90 million when I started. It was respectable, but my father was never satisfied. He wanted more, and I was determined to deliver. Over the next 10 years, I transformed the company. I led our expansion into Europe, convinced a skeptical board to invest in artificial intelligence when it was still new, and steered us through 2 market crashes. We created a security platform that protected major banks in America, and then we sold it to the biggest names in London and Berlin. For the first time, people started calling me the girl genius, writing articles about my visionary leadership. I smiled at the headlines but knew I'd only just begun. My father, though, saw me differently. No matter what I did, he still looked at me as if I were the same little girl sneaking cookies in the kitchen after midnight. Every victory was followed by a reminder that none of it would have happened without him. Sometimes I wondered if he was proud or just threatened. He would praise me in public, but in private it was always about the next target, the next goal. "You've done well, Olivia," he'd say, "but you still have so much to learn." Despite it all, I loved the company. It was a living thing to me, one I had helped grow, through every late night and every crisis. My father may have founded Bennett Dynamics, but I was the one who gave it a new life. By my 10th year, our revenue had soared to over $950 million. I still remember the day we closed that record deal with a bank in Switzerland. My team celebrated in the office, popping champagne, laughter echoing down the marble halls. I stood by the window, looking out at the city, feeling both proud and strangely empty. There was always something missing between my father and me, a closeness I saw in other families, a warmth that never made it past the marble floors of our house. I told myself it didn't matter, that I didn't need his approval, but deep down I always hoped for it. Maybe that's why I worked so hard, why I pushed myself past every limit. I thought that if I could just make the company into something incredible,
He'd finally look at me and see an equal, not just a daughter.
But my father's vision for my future was always bigger than the company. For years, he hinted that I should think about settling down, marrying someone worthy of the Bennett name. I brushed it off, laughing at the idea that I should choose love for business. Still, the hints kept coming: dinners with eligible bachelors, coincidental meetings at charity galas, and conversations that sounded more like negotiations than anything romantic. Looking back, I should have seen what was coming. The moment that changed everything didn't happen in a boardroom or on a trading floor. It happened one December evening, at our annual Christmas party. The house was filled with people: executives, investors, old friends, and new faces, all dressed in their finest. The halls were draped in lights, the air warm with the smell of pine and cinnamon, laughter bouncing off the high ceilings. Outside, the city was covered in a blanket of snow, the lake frozen under a pale moon. I stood by the window, glass of champagne in hand, watching the party swirl around me. My father was talking with William Hayes, a name I'd heard before: a young, successful investment banker from New York, ambitious and charming in that way only people who'd never truly failed could be. As the night went on, I began to notice the way my father looked at me, the way he nodded toward William, the way old friends whispered in corners. That was the night the world I built began to crack. I didn't know it yet, but the girl who had given her heart to a company, who had turned a dream into a $950 million empire, was about to be tested in ways she could never have imagined. I was Olivia Bennett, his daughter, his partner, his rival. And as the snow fell outside, I realized I was also something else, the only one standing between my father's ambition and my future. The night of the Christmas party seemed to shimmer with promise and tradition. Our house was aglow from the inside out, every room bursting with guests and golden light, the kind that made even old paintings on the walls appear young again. Every year, my father transformed the mansion into a palace: crystal chandeliers polished to perfection, marble floors gleaming, and tables set with the finest silverware. The entire business world of Chicago seemed to be in attendance that night. Board members, CEOs, bankers, journalists, even a handful of politicians, all eager for a word with Victor Bennett, the king in his castle. But even with the grandeur, I couldn't shake the sense that something was different this year. My father seemed more animated, more insistent than usual, his attention fixed on me and William Hayes. William was the picture of Wall Street ambition: impeccably tailored suit, smooth dark hair, and a smile so practiced it could have been trademarked. I had seen his name in financial columns for years, always attached to some impressive acquisition or deal. He was the kind of man my father admired, hungry for power, relentlessly focused, and above all, utterly conventional. My father introduced us near the fireplace, his arm draped around William's shoulder as if they were already family. I could feel the warmth of the fire at my back, the scent of pine from the Christmas tree, the quiet hum of 100 conversations swirling around us. William offered his hand with confidence. "Olivia, I've heard so much about you," he said. I shook his hand, smiled politely, but inside I felt a growing chill. The way my father looked at us like two chess pieces he was moving into place made me uneasy. Dinner was a parade of small talk, compliments, and half-hidden expectations. My father kept glancing between me and William, his eyes sharp, measuring. I knew him well enough to sense that he was building up to something. After dessert, as the waitstaff cleared away the plates and laughter echoed through the hall, my father called for everyone's attention. He stood tall, commanding the room with that old confidence I'd seen 1,000 times in boardrooms and press conferences. He began with the usual pleasantries: how proud he was of the company's growth, how grateful he was for the team, and how the future looked brighter than ever. People nodded and clapped, raising their glasses. Then, as if rehearsed, he pulled William to his side and made the announcement that would change everything. "My friends, tonight is about more than just celebrating another successful year," my father said, his voice ringing out above the crowd. "Tonight, we look ahead to the future not only of Bennett Dynamics, but of the Bennett family. I am thrilled to tell you all that I expect my daughter Olivia will marry William Hayes, uniting our families and ensuring the continued legacy of this great company." For a heartbeat, the world was silent. I felt every gaze in the room land on me, curiosity and excitement mixing in the air. My father looked at me, expectation and warning in his eyes. William tried to take my hand, but I stepped back. I laughed. I didn't mean to, but the absurdity of it, the arrogance, the assumption that I would simply say yes because it was good for business was too much. The laughter came out sharp and clear, slicing through the tense silence. "I'm sorry, Father," I said, my voice steady, "but I'll never marry for business. Not for you, not for anyone." My words hit the room like a thunderclap. My father's face drained of color, then flushed with anger. William looked like he'd just been slapped. For a moment, nobody moved, nobody spoke. Then my father's voice, cold and cutting, filled the space. "You are no longer welcome in my home or my company. You are finished, Olivia." He said it not just to me, but to everyone. The message was clear: his daughter had defied him, and the punishment would be public and absolute. I stood there, the room spinning. I could feel the eyes, the judgment, the shock, but also something else: relief. I realized I'd been holding my breath for years, dancing to someone else's music. Now, finally, I was free. I smiled, even as tears threatened at the edges of my vision. "You'll regret this," I said softly but loud enough for everyone to hear. "And I'll never forgive you." I turned and walked away, head high, through the crowd that parted like water before me. No one tried to stop me, not even my father. I left the mansion with nothing but my handbag, my dignity, and the knowledge that the company he was so desperate to protect was, in truth, my creation. The empire he believed was his alone had been built by my hands, shaped by my vision, and held together by my secrets. As I stepped out into the cold night, the snow swirling in the glow of the streetlights, I realized how little I really owned. My name was no longer on the door of Bennett Dynamics. I had no home to go back to, no inheritance to claim. But what my father didn't understand was that I had something much more valuable: knowledge. I knew every code that ran our products, every deal that kept us afloat, every handshake and promise that gave Bennett Dynamics its strength. I had contacts, friends, and allies, some who would stay silent, others who owed me everything. That night, as I walked away from everything I'd known, I could have felt broken. Instead, I felt alive. My father believed that running a company was as simple as making demands, but I knew the truth. It took heart, intuition, and an understanding of people, things he had long ago sacrificed in his hunger for control. The city was quiet as I made my way to a friend's apartment downtown, my shoes crunching on fresh snow. I thought of all the late nights I'd spent building Bennett Dynamics, all the sacrifices, the wins, the losses. I thought of my mother and how she used to tell me that the best gifts are the ones we give ourselves. That night I gave myself a gift: freedom. I made a promise, right there on that frozen street. I would build something new, something even greater, and one day, I would come back not for his approval, but for my own. And that was the night the daughter became the rival. I always thought that losing everything in one night would feel like the end of the world. In truth, it felt more like standing at the edge of a cliff, terrifying, yes, but also strangely exhilarating. For the first time in my life, I was no longer living in my father's shadow. I was Olivia Bennett, alone in New York City, renting a cramped apartment above a bakery in Greenwich Village. It wasn't luxury. My kitchen window overlooked a tangle of fire escapes, and the heat clanged through old pipes, but it was mine. For the first time, I was free to fail or to fly, and that freedom was worth more than all the marble and silver I'd left behind. Life in New York was colder than I expected, both literally and metaphorically. I was far from my old circle of friends, most of whom had vanished the moment my name disappeared from the Bennett Dynamics masthead. The first winter was bitter. I sometimes lay awake at night listening to the city's endless hum, wondering if I'd made a terrible mistake. But every morning, the aroma of fresh bread from the bakery below drifted up through the cracks in my floorboards, reminding me that I was still alive, that my story wasn't over. With nothing but my experience and stubbornness to guide me, I threw myself into work. I started as a consultant for a handful of scrappy tech startups in Manhattan companies that reminded me of Bennett Dynamics in its earliest days, full of promise and chaos. I didn't have a big name to offer them anymore, but I had something better, a mind shaped by a decade of navigating the cutthroat world of corporate America. I learned quickly how to stretch a dollar, how to negotiate for my worth, and how to spot the cracks in a business before anyone else did. Soon, word of my work spread, not just in New York, but to Europe. I was invited to London to advise a cybersecurity firm, then to Berlin for a digital banking project, and then to Paris for a tech conference that would change my life. For the first time, I was earning money in both dollars and pounds. And my name, just Olivia Bennett, not Victor's daughter, began to appear in articles, this time as an expert in her own right. In Paris, among the glass towers and centuries-old streets, I met Alexander Pierce. He was nothing like the men my father had tried to push on me back in Chicago. Alexander was British, a self-made billionaire whose empire stretched from London to New York. He was sharp, witty, and most importantly, respected me for my mind. We talked for hours that first night about technology, ambition, and the strange, lonely world of building something from nothing. He didn't flinch when I told him about my past. Instead, he admired my drive and understood the pain of betrayal. We fell in love the way people fall into a warm room on a snowy night, unexpectedly, but undeniable. While my world was growing, my father's was shrinking. Back in Chicago, Victor Bennett was fighting a losing battle. He had thought, perhaps, that I was easily replaced. He hired new executives, tried to rebrand, but Bennett Dynamics began to unravel almost as soon as I left. The products I'd built were too complex for his new team to understand. Secret deals fell apart. Old allies, feeling betrayed by my dismissal, quietly left for rival companies. Even the company's code, the architecture I had written line by line, began to fail, bringing embarrassing outages and panicked phone calls. Within a year, the market began to sense the trouble. Stock prices slid, reporters sniffed out the internal chaos, and our most valuable clients started pulling their contracts. My father tried to steady the ship, but he didn't have the patience or the instincts for this kind of crisis. The harder he pushed, the faster things collapsed. Eventually, the board, many of whom remembered my work, forced him to consider selling half the company just to stay afloat. Desperate and with few options left, my father sold 50% of Bennett Dynamics shares to an unknown international buyer. The sale happened quickly, quietly, at a price so low I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. What he didn't realize was that Alexander and I had planned this moment carefully. We'd spent months acquiring shares through European investment firms, waiting for the perfect time to strike. When my father's back was against the wall, we swept in and bought the majority at a bargain. By then, Alexander and I were married, partners in business and life. Combining my original 5% stake, shares my father never thought to take from me when he threw me out with Alexander's newly acquired 50%. We controlled 55% of Bennett Dynamics. We were now the majority shareholders of the very company my father once claimed I'd never see again. I'll never forget the morning I returned to Chicago. The city was glazed with snow, just as it had been that night he'd cast me out. I walked into the Bennett Dynamics headquarters dressed not in the somber suits of my past, but in a deep blue dress and boots that carried the confidence of every mile I traveled. When I entered the boardroom, the executives fell silent, one by one. My father was sitting at the head of the table, his hair now streaked with gray, his eyes tired but defiant. He looked up, confusion written across his face. "Who bought these shares?" he demanded, as if refusing to believe the truth he already sensed. I sat down across from him, my gaze steady and calm. "That would be me," I said, the same cool smile on my lips that I'd worn the night he threw me out. "Good morning, Mr. Bennett. From now on, you can call me Madam Chairwoman." The silence that followed was thick with disbelief and a touch of fear. My father, who had once announced my exile with such certainty, was now at the mercy of the daughter he tried to erase. I felt no triumph, only a deep sense of justice. This was not revenge, but restoration. I had taken back what was rightfully mine, not just for myself, but for everyone who had ever been told they weren't enough. That day, the power in Bennett Dynamics shifted for good. The company would never be the same, and neither would I. The first morning I sat in my new office as chairwoman of Bennett Dynamics. The city of Chicago stretched below me, sunlight streaming across the glass towers like a benediction. There was a sense of victory in the air, but it was quieter than I'd imagined. No thunderclap, just a steady, rising confidence deep inside my chest. The same company that had once cast me out was now wholly under my control. And as I looked out over the city, I knew that the real work was just beginning. Taking over Bennett Dynamics was not a matter of simply flipping a switch. The company had been slowly poisoned by years of neglect, arrogance, and outdated thinking. My father had surrounded himself with loyalists, people more interested in pleasing him than building anything of lasting value. Many of them were the very faces who'd looked on silently the night he cast me out. Too afraid to challenge his authority, too comfortable in their positions to care about the future of the company. I remembered every single one. In my first week, I called an all-hands meeting. I stood before the entire staff, executives, engineers, marketers, assistants, my voice steady, my posture unyielding. I thanked those who had supported me quietly through the turmoil, and I made it clear that the era of fear and favoritism was over. I promised to lead with vision and integrity, but I also made it clear that I expected excellence. The message was simple. If you were here to innovate, to work, and to rebuild, there would always be a place for you. If not, your time was up. The old guard began to fall away almost immediately. Some resigned in protest, others were let go after a single frank conversation. I replaced them with new talent people with fresh ideas, bright eyes, and the kind of hunger I remembered from my earliest days at the company. I rehired a few who had been forced out under my father's reign, extending olive branches and apologies where they were due. I assembled a team that valued courage over comfort, people who understood that greatness is never given, it's earned, every day. Innovation returned to Bennett Dynamics like the first green shoots after a storm. We scrapped outdated projects and invested heavily in research and development. I launched new initiatives in artificial intelligence and cybersecurity, forming partnerships with firms in London, Paris, and New York. Our competitors were stunned by the speed of our turnaround. The media called it the Bennett Renaissance. But for me, it wasn't just a business victory, it was personal redemption. For the first time, my name, not my father's, appeared on every headline. Meanwhile, my father watched from the sidelines, powerless to stop the changes he could neither predict nor understand. His pride had always been his armor, but now it was just a burden. He tried to rally support from the board, but the board was mine. He tried to stir up old alliances in the press, but they had moved on. I saw the hurt in his eyes at our first shareholder meeting, saw the disbelief that his empire could slip away so easily, but I didn't let myself feel pity. He had made his choices, now so had I. The final act of my revenge came quietly, as these things often do. Our old family mansion, my childhood home, the very house where I had been humiliated and cast aside, went up for sale. Years of neglect, poor management, and the fallout from my father's collapse had left it nearly abandoned. The bank listed it for a fraction of its former value. I bought it immediately, my lawyer handling the transaction with swift efficiency. When the deal closed, I stood before the gates, keys in hand, feeling the past and future converge. I changed the locks, repainted the rooms, and replaced the heavy curtains with bright, airy fabrics. I filled the halls with light and laughter, inviting friends and colleagues to the housewarming, something I'd never experienced as a child. The ghosts of my old life faded, replaced by new memories of celebration and joy. My father, for the first time, was on the outside looking in. I will never forget the last time I saw Victor Bennett. He was standing on the sidewalk, staring up at the house as if he couldn't quite believe what he saw. The man who had once commanded every room, every conversation, every moment, now looked small and defeated. His shoulders were hunched, his suit wrinkled, his eyes searching for something that was no longer his. I walked past him without a word, my head high, my heart strangely calm. He tried to speak, maybe to apologize, maybe to plead, but I looked right through him. To me, he was a stranger. People often ask me if I ever forgave him. The truth is, I didn't. Some wounds cut too deep for forgiveness. My father had chosen his pride over his daughter, his legacy over his flesh and blood. He had thrown me out not just of his house, but of his heart. I remembered my promise to never forgive, to make him regret his decision, and I kept it. Yet, in the end, my story is not only about revenge. It's about reclaiming what was mine, about rising from ruin to build something better, about refusing to let anyone, not even family, dictate the shape of my life. The house, the company, the future, I made them my own, not by inheriting them, but by fighting for them every single day. When people ask how I built my empire, I tell them the truth. Never let anyone write your story for you, not your bother, not your boss, not even the world itself. You will be tested, you will lose, you will fall. But America is the land of second chances, and second chances belong to those who dare to seize them. I lost everything, and I gained more than I ever dreamed, not just a company, not just a house, but freedom and self-respect that no one can ever take away. So this is my story, the story of how a daughter took back her destiny, brick by brick, share by share, and never looked back.